Okay, so uh, we're gonna talk about uh, unpleasant topic, but the reality: suicide. Uh, Case happened. Somebody distant that we knew committed. A young kid, relatively, but we don't know what goes in their minds. And when it happens, then we all wake up. What happened? Uh, the problem is the sansar. If it was just the outside world, it would be easy to fix it. But the sansar has made into our minds so much, and the turmoil that goes on in the mind is unperceptible. It's not perceptible by anyone until the person comes out and talks. And even then, they talk when they themselves are in a confused state. Their language, the ways of expression becomes gibberish. Because the sansar is something that creates all of us. We forget that we were created by the consciousness. The moment you're born, your identity is given to you, that you are this. All of a sudden, we have new name, which we never had before. We are called Shrenik or John or Heather or whatever. So the names are given to us, social security number is given to us, bank account is created on our name, all these things, and this is your father, this is your mother, and nobody really cares to think even that where is this Atma, whatever you call it, is coming from. What journey that soul has gone through, what has it transpired then to be born, let alone they themselves don't even think that way. So nobody has chance to go within, only because we have everything that is outside, starting with our parents that we rely on, our siblings that we play with, our friends that as we go to schooling, we get education, we make the money, make a living, and till we die. It seems like a self-sufficient game, and there is nobody has to look outside. So we leave a borrowed entity, and in this borrowed entity, which is not just external thing, it becomes an internal belief also that yes, my name is Shrenik. In the middle of night, 10, 15 people are sleeping. Somebody shouts Shrenik, only I will get up. Nobody else will get up because I have synchronized with that name so much that I believe that's me. And that creates our ego and our identifications. And ego wants to seclude itself and wants to expand as much as possible by owning more and more things. And the only thing we know where to get those things from is sansar again, because sansar is all in our mind. So sansar itself becomes everything for us. It literally creates us, it maintains us, and even destroys us. The day, like you do something and the church says that you cannot marry in this our church, that's the end of the world for people. Because they were made to believe that they are Christians, for example. This is probably present in all religions, I'm just saying. So that you did this and you did this, so you cannot be part of our church. And it's almost like a suicide. And people kill themselves just because they cannot have their identity. So identities become your possessions. And when these possessions are taken away, we don't like it. And frictions happen at the ego level. My ego wants to win, and your ego also wants to win. So if there are two parties who wants to win, there is always invariably interactions. And for interactions, the physical interactions are obvious. We have weapons and we can fight it out with punches or worse, whatever. But at the mind level, our weapons are our ideas, our beliefs, our thoughts, all those convictions which are in our minds are in a very subtle way our weapons. We have consciousness. Consciousness is pristine, is undifferentiated. That's what we brought in with. The differentiation starts after exposure to sansar. And the sansar starts getting its roots into our minds. And mind, which was very pure, innocent, as a kid, used to enjoy life. Everybody was acceptable. All were my friends. And I had a way to find out what the world is about. Before I can even proceed, I'm being bombarded with all these identities. And these identities become a burden for me. And all through the life, I lived with that burden. So invariably, what happens is the interactions start when I meet somebody who does not have the same beliefs. If I am a Hindu and if I meet someone else, he's not Hindu, then I have a wall, a big wall standing between me and him. And this is how the whole society gets divided. And yet, we have to live. We have to function. And we have to achieve our goals, which are not even our goals, our ego's goals. So our ego wants this, our ego wants this. So invariably, the battles happen, whether it's verbal or worse, even mental. If I want something and someone else also wants the same thing, I may not be able to get. Frustration builds up, anger builds up, greed, of course, is always there. Ego always makes you want more and more and more. And the life becomes just trying to acquire, hold, and get bigger. Unfortunately, this path is laden with sufferings. So once we get the identity, we start believing that as a reality. That is our personality. As we talked before, persona. Persona means a mask. So in Greek theologies, they used to perform the dramas where the actors, actresses would be wearing the masks. And when they wear the mask, that becomes such a reality for them, so it actually gives them encouragement to act that way also. If a Ram becomes Ram, then he really wants to act out the Ram. And if Ravan becomes Ravan. But as soon as you take the masks off, you're all friends. But when the mask is on, you really believe. And this belief leads to suffering, because if somebody says that I am Hindu, you really believe that. And all these ideologies and scriptures and all that, I become defender of it. And same thing with Islam or Christianity or whatever. And everybody is walking around with these personas. And that's why we call personalities. But we never think what is behind these personalities, we never think. And that's where the suffering comes. So real realization never happens until somebody decides to turn around and go backwards. So we live our whole life in this borrowed state of existence. In this borrowed state of existence, we set our conditions. So that, okay, I want this, I want this, I want that. And this is what I am, I am, I am. So if you make out a book and each page you write down, what's your identification? As we do it in the retreat, who are you, right? After a while you run out of all these things, but all these things, that okay, I am a doctor, I have this many patients, or this one, this is my wife, I am this person's husband or husband, wife or whatever. Everything is relative. There is nothing independent. The whole idea of retreat is to go beyond the relativity. Theory of relativity is not a joke, it's a reality. When Einstein proved that everything in this universe is relative, Mahavir had projected theory 2500 years ago, where he said that everything is relative to each other. That's why he created the theory of Shadvad. Shad means nothing is certain. You saying this? Okay, maybe. I don't know. The real truth comes only when you go within and you find your own truth. Until then, it's a relative truth. My name is Shrenik. Yeah, it's my truth and probably your truth too, because I respond. But is it a reality? No, I was not born with it. But only deeper reflections can actually start questioning. But people don't have time or even freedom because the sansar keeps on bombarding. Your requirements are so much that every single second you wake up till you go to sleep is occupied in responding as your personality. And these personalities are continuously functioning. And we believe that sansar is the only source of everything. So sansar becomes the source of pleasure. And because the sansar becomes the source of pleasure, it also becomes source of suffering. Because when you don't get pleasure, you suffer. So it's again your pleasures are also relative, and your suffering is also relative. So every single product of sansar is relative. Say you have $10 million, you think you are the richest kid in the block. You move to the next block where it starts at $10 million. Everything is $100 million. Now you have a problem. Everything is relative. To feel good, you have to hang out in the same complex where there is a $10 million complex and it goes on. And goes on the other side also. Oh, I'm so poor. I have only $10 million. It's all relative. All our emotions are relative. All our hatreds are relatives. All our loves are even relatives. But we don't realize that because meditation, which allows you to go beyond, is tough because we have invested so much time and efforts from the time we are born until we have really created our whole life around these personalities. It's tough to go back. So when somebody comes and tell you that all these things that you believe are wrong, the ego does not want to accept. And the ego doesn't want to turn around because turning around is the death of the ego itself. And nobody wants to do that. So what happens is, so the sansar becomes the source of pleasure, source of suffering also. So whatever we want from sansar is conditional. I want certain things from sansar. And when your desires become intense, suffering becomes inevitable. So the person who is wiser, he understands that, okay, I cannot have this, so I'll have alternative. But the person who goes through a lot of turmoil and concentrates all his consciousness or her consciousness onto one object, that if this doesn't become mine, there is no point. So most of the people have ability to at least divide throughout the sansar. I had one family, Spanish family. One day the daughter comes to me because the father died. Father had diabetes and he believed in enjoying life, and of course he had a very bad diabetes and he ended up on dialysis and used to tell me, said, Doc, what's wrong with you? Come to my house, I'll feed you. Yes, I said, George, you don't realize this habit of yours of eating is gonna take you into disaster. But he just never listened, and finally it came to a point that he died. So one of the daughters was came a couple of days after funeral, and she was so upset and crying, and so I spent a little time with her, and I made her realize that there is no point in suffering. Try to go beyond and learn the meditation. You actually know who you are. And she seemed to be interested, so I sent her some audios and everything, and I thought she was on her right way. And for 2-3 weeks, she comes back for a physical, and then she was bubbly, happy. All of a sudden, I said, in my mind, I said, what happened to the shock that she was going through? Oh, we just got the news, my sister is gonna have a baby. Okay, so now the consciousness has shifted from father onto the baby. But it's still the sansar until, which later on I found out, this is fast forward 2 years later, the sister found out the husband was cheating on her. Now they are divorced. So now they kind of feel that if the baby was not there, it will be easy split. Now the baby has to suffer and all that. So same baby, becomes a problem. Not the baby is a problem, but it's all the play of our emotions. So sansar gives you, sansar take it away. All this baffling is going on all our life only because we believe in sansar as a reality, and it's not. But who is going to tell you? So when this borrowed reality becomes unbearable, and if you cannot find the escape, people think of committing suicide. And even the suicides are committed believing that I am the body. And by ripping off the connection from the body, you think you're going to be relieved. But it doesn't happen. The reality is something else. If you really think about it, there is no death. We talk about it, right? The body is made out of 5 elements. They go back to the same 5 elements. Molecules never get destroyed. They make new bodies and all that. So, and the soul, which is the all-time provider of the consciousness, the awareness, cannot die because it's a spirit. So what really dies? What dies is your mind. Because mind is holding on to the belief that I am the body. And if something happens to the body, most of the people suffer because they want the body. And the body, through the body, the 5 senses, they can have all the pleasures of the world. Eating, drinking, enjoying, seeing, touching, hugging, whatever. These are all the pleasures derived from the sansar. And for that you need the senses. And for that you need the body. So when the body is coming to an end in a natural way, they don't want it because their desires are still not finished. So for them, that's like a death. Because mind has believed that it is the body and the body is going, so they perceive it as a death. So death is a fixed thing which comes. Most of the times people go on with life because there is tomorrow. If you lose your battle today in acquiring something, so there is a next day. Another day is coming. So at least there is a future. Death, there is no future. Every day has width. Death has no width, but it has depth. It has a tremendous amount of depth because it's a certain reality that is coming and people cannot handle it. People like fantasies. Our whole life goes on in fantasies because the reality is painful. Reality is so painful, that's what we were talking about, because in India, because the movies are so popular, because movies cater to the fantasies. What you cannot have in your daily life, movies allow you to roam wild for 3 hours, enjoy your fantasies. Kissing the heroine or kissing the hero and hugging and this and that in Himalayan mountains which you're never going to see, or worse even Switzerland, and all those fantasies packed cinemas are very popular. But that also does not mean that that's where we end. In every day we look at the fantasies, because fantasies are more prettier than the day-to-day ugliness. Ugliness is there because we don't want to accept the reality. In fact, the life is beautiful only if we stop our desires. But the people who cannot know or cannot learn how to stop the desires, and the anatomy of the desires, desire is something walking away from what you have into projecting into something what you want to have. So you're creating a future. So when the death comes, the future ends. And that's why people don't like it. So for the people who commit suicide, that fantasy has ended. He or she has tried all the avenues where they cannot have what they wanted, and they had invested all their consciousness onto 1 or 2 things, and when those 2 things fail, so it's a conditional thing that okay, sansar can still be a pleasure. At the last minute, if they see an outlet, for example, and if they see that, oh, condition has changed, then they don't want to kill themselves. It's an impulsive thing. It's a very impulsive thing that the guy might say that, okay, he has put all his nest eggs, say $5 million into the stock market, and all of a sudden the market crashes. It came down to $1 million. People commit suicides. They jump off the windows. It has happened so many times. But at the last minute, if the Dow shoots up 30%, oh, then I don't have to die. Tadatmya, tat atma. Atma, instead of knowing your own Atma, you have put down anything else or anyone else as your own soul. And you put your belief in that particular person or an object, and people commit suicide because the girlfriends leave. Okay, you were at some point without that girlfriend, you existed. And after she goes, you're going to still exist. But they don't want to accept that. Our perpetual existence, they don't recognize that. And they put all their time, efforts, tan, man, dhan, everything into one particular person or object or fame, whatever. And then people commit suicide because the things went wrong. So our conditions are put on the sansar. And sansar is moving all the time. Sansaran. Sansaran means everything that moves. You put your condition on one particular person, but that person has put condition on someone else. It's like you leave your own home and knock on some other people's doors, but it's locked. The guy has gone someone else's door, but that door is also locked. And then it goes on. Sansar is like a cycle. It just goes on. A blind leading blind. They never realize that the peace and comfort that we're looking from through someone else is available within you, but nobody has chance or guidance to go within. So the anatomy of the suicide is very complex for the people who are actually going through this turmoil. So the only way it can be prevented in the long run is reach to the stability and find out where your actual identification is. And everything that is visible to you when you meditate and you listen, you observe your thoughts and your beliefs and ideas and all that, you realize that every single thing it pertains to sansar. And when you can just become a witness within yourself, the awareness is the only subject in the world. Subject-object relationship is very simple, but it can be very tricky to understand. When I see you, you are an object, I am the subject. But if I extend my subjectivity and apply it to my own body, my body is an object. And my consciousness, and I ask people, what else? Who is looking at your body? And they say, my mind, because that's all they know. My mind is looking at it. But then through the meditation, you can objectify your mind even. And when that objectivity is assigned to the mind itself, everything becomes remote. And the only thing that survives is the subjectivity of the consciousness. The consciousness is the ultimate subject, which is looking at your mind, your body, and the sansar. He is the only Krishna. We all are gopis going around in circles. He's the one in the center. Whatever you name, the name you give, it doesn't matter. It's a nameless consciousness. But that's where the ultimate reality remains. But once you go beyond, then everything, if you really interpret, say a murder takes place, right? These are all intensified emotions, right? You hate someone or whatever. And you really put into action, which is the highest and the worst, of course, is the murder, right? Inside you may be hating, but you don't kill people, right? So when actually killing happens, is the highest of the emotions, right? So you really believe in the sansar so much, the sansar being so real, that killing someone is possible. But it's not possible. If you really go within and you realize that you kill yourself even, but the body goes, which was gonna go anyway. You just speeded up the process, that's all. But the new body is gonna have to come because your desires are still there. It's the desires that matter, but nobody understands that. Most of the people don't. Only the people who take the internal path are the one who realize that it's the desires, their own desires are a problem. So murder takes place, and that's how Eckhart Tolle reached enlightenment, the guy who wrote Power of Now. He said, because he was very poor, he decided to kill himself. He was in Britain. He says, I have no money. This is not the way to live life. I'm going to kill myself. And he was in a very deep emotional turmoil. And he said, this is it. I can't take this anymore. So he said, I'm going to kill myself. Suddenly something struck himself that whenever something happens, like a murder or even a suicide, it's like a murder. Somebody is killing. In a murder, a murderer is separate than the one who is murdered, right? So one guy dies, another walks away. So what is going to happen in this one? who is killing me? And he reached into the enlightenment immediately, because he was in so much emotional turmoil that the killing entity and the entity being killed are two separate things. And he reached enlightenment. He became a spiritual leader, and he wrote this book, Power of Now, which has seen millions of copies. Without to say he is a multi-billionaire. So, but his body is multi. His consciousness is never. There is no death in consciousness. There is immortality. There are advantages of going within, and you anchor yourself into this stable, perpetual, Sanatan entity. There is only joy. There is no suffering. There are no murders. There are no suicides. Suicide is also a murder of a beautiful body that is given to us. This body can be utilized in a positive way to reach higher, because we are the only one possible. Dogs cannot reach enlightenment, neither can any other animals. We are capable for it. So the way to we should do is explore within ourselves. Instead of keep running and running and running, sansar gives, whatever it gives will be illusory. It will be taken away. If life doesn't take it away, death will take it away, for sure. The sooner we realize this wisdom, the internal reflection, the wisdom starts rising, and you realize the futility of our running. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to start slowing down and down and down. And it's a slow process. But you know what? It's like a garden. You reach to a garden, and you may not be in the garden itself, but the fragrance starts coming in. The peace starts coming in. Silence starts coming in. Or your reactivity starts slowing down. You're feeling insulted, or somebody's telling you down, it doesn't matter. So all these changes start happening in your personality, and ultimately personality starts weakening, a personality which is borrowed personality. And as the borrowed personality is weakening, your internal personality, which is the real personality, starts rising. And your inner consciousness actually takes the form of a person. A person meaning not a person, the physical person, but you have a body. You have your expansion, your arms and legs and infinity. The expansion turns into an infinite existence, which you become that. You become part of the ocean, just the way a river which is bound by the banks ultimately gives up itself as a river, merges into the ocean, it becomes the ocean. Now you have a new personality, new existence, which is free from suffering. So all these things are possible if you follow the path of meditation. All right, so much for that.